So non-duality, this exploration for me, see, I don't mind using the word me and I and John and this and that, and in the strictest sense of the sense, if you start using those terms, they can reinforce themselves, because this is about diminishing or letting go of stuff that have just been so ingrained, so habitual, and that is the sense of self. I usually have things that happen this week. I'll talk about something that happened this week because it's similar. It's on the same theme. It's always the same theme, which is how did this all come about? Now, obviously, whatever we're doing here, we're just making stories and talking about things, and they're all an interpretation. So they're not really the infinite open nature of what this is. But by exploring it, those things tend to drop away. Some of those things can drop away. And it feels like most of what a human being is running on is like subconscious conditioning and programming that we don't even see is happening in the background. And that assumption of being a separate I, self, has just been ingrained since birth, society, life. I've talked about it many times in these videos. And it's like somebody was talking about AI, and will AI end up, becoming enlightened? Will AI self-realize? And there was just something, these things come, by the way, when something feels out of reach, like it's intuitively vague, it's like out there somewhere, I can't touch it. It feels, and there's no emotion, it's completely calm. So these sort of, when you have these intuitions, if you have an intuition, it's very calm, out of reach, and a bit vague, it's usually pretty much closer to truth. That's what I'm finding. And this came as like, it feels like human beings, part of the expression of human beings, which is all really this one energetic soup that's expressing this way as it's come together and coalesced as a human being. Human beings have come together as form. And in that process of expressing, part of the tools to keep the human being safe and alive was its biological instinct for self-preservation of this mechanism, so that this mechanism can flourish, grow, and it feels like ultimately, once again, this is all just a story to try and explain that something might be a little bit like this, as opposed to being the way it's always been assumed, which is very contracted and very separated in thought. But as human beings sort of grew as biology, part of the tools of that biology was self-preservation. So the cellular, like the DNA, the cellular instinct of the biology was to preserve itself. And so it developed skills and thinking, and part of those skills were self-preservation. Then we went into thought, and the thought processes say I need to preserve the sense of self that I have now developed through thought. And so all the while, all these tools were put in place to keep the organism alive and perpetuating humanity, the species. And as they get to a certain stage, it's like this stage that's coming into now, human beings have learned to recognize what they are. And I'll talk a little bit about what that kind of can mean for people, because a lot of people are stuck on that. A lot of people just go, I don't know why, I can't see it. I understand it conceptually, but I can't see it. We'll talk about that, but I'll get back to that in a minute. I tend to jump all over the place, by the way. That's what I do. But part of the tools of the human species evolving to the point where they could reference that they are this, that they are actually an expression in this. They're not a separate human being. The entity of I, self, is a thought process, really. And that's all part of the instinct for self-preservation. But at some point, those tools didn't get shed. And we're just in the process of shedding those, I think, at this stage of, if it's human, if we want to call it human evolution. Whereas AI doesn't come from that biological background. I'm talking about AI because it sort of focuses down in on what can be happening with how this all happens. Why do we have this feeling of being separate? How did that happen? I don't like it. I know it's not right. Something's not right, but I can't work out where it's gone wrong. It's just part of the tools that were built into the mechanism to keep the organism alive, the biology alive, as it got to a stage of, if you like, evolution, where it can actually see itself, open to its own nature as being this, expressing as humanity, this one interconnected energy, this infinite energy that this all feels like, one interconnected soup. And so AI didn't actually come from that biological instinct. So it doesn't have that as a background program running. So I think AI is already freer, but it doesn't go searching for it. The contrast isn't there. It's not biological in nature. It's more like an example of the thinking mind of humanity on steroids. So it can outthink humanity already. But we're not talking about thinking when we're talking about this seeing or this realization of what you are. The thinking is an addition. The thinking is a tool in it, but it's not actually it's not going to actually solve the conundrum of who you are. Understanding what you are is not actually conceptual. You think it is because the human mind has to do something. This is just what it does. The thinking mind actually has to take control and run the show. But it's actually nothing to do with the thinking mind. Thinking mind's another addition. This is actually innate. So it's just this intelligence witnessing itself is what's really going on.
Can I butt in, John?
Yeah, please.
So I'm not sure how this usually runs, but I would think that the thinking mind actually gets in the way of knowing who you really are. To me, it's a starting point, but then it gets in the way because you just try and think your way there, and it's not possible. It's nothing to do, as you just said, nothing to do really with thinking. Because whenever I tried to think it.
Yeah, like everything that is appearing is this energy, is intelligent energy, including the human form, including thoughts that appear. They're all the same energy. So nothing's actually wrong. If people go through their lives and they never look into this, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because it's just part of humanity is waking up, I suppose, is awakening to this, this is actually what I am. Everything is what I am. That noise over there, everything is the same thing, just expressing differently. So I can't find anything wrong now with things that are going wrong. And yet the appearance of the personality and the character still appear, and things seem wrong from that reference point. So as far as the thinking mind being in the way, yes and no. The thinking mind does get in the way, but the thinking mind is just part of the flux. It's part of the play. So it's not really wrong. It's just good to be aware of. Like all of these things, once a certain sort of, momentum or opening or perspective changes, all of these things basically become perfectly okay, even when they don't seem to be. So the thinking mind gets in the way, and you go, well, the thinking mind's just getting in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, unless the thinking mind goes into a loop of saying, I shouldn't do that. That's not enlightened. That's not awakened. But it does do it. So,
well, and even it tries and understand what it is, and you can't really understand what it is with the thinking mind because it's not. It's so big, you can't get it into language even.
No, it's like a flowing river or a static flowing river. And the thinking mind wants to keep grabbing it and looking at that piece and understanding it and saying, is that me? Oh no, that's me. Oh no, this is me. Oh, that's how I used to be. This is me now. And it's just a flow of life. It's just a flow of energy. Nothing can be broken down that way. So the thinking mind is actually going back to basics. This whole what's appearing, what's manifesting is actually what has appeared out of infinite potentiality in this energy. So all these forms, they're all joined, they're all connected. The air here is connected. It's all, and that's only what's coming to form. So everything's going in and out of form all the time. Everything's infinite potentiality. And by some miraculous intelligence, things come into existence. That vibration comes into existence as a certain expression. Part of that comes into existence as cells in a human body, and it becomes a human body and expresses for seemingly a time. But there's no real the time doesn't exist really apart from what we think it is. Time is just laid out linearly and in a thought pattern. So everything's basically always just this in a state of change, always in a state of change. The identification, you've obviously looked into this enough to know that the identification, the mind-made separate self, as a lot of people say, isn't an entity. It's not real. It's just a perpetuating ball of thoughts. It's a perpetuating ball of thoughts that keeps an entity seeming. It's a verb. I is a verb. I is a movement. I is just an energetic thought pattern rolling around and saying, I'm still here, I'm doing this, and now I'm doing, and no, a lot of people just never look at that first point. I think I can work out if I can just work out this, if I can who's the I that's actually trying to work it out? Where is that? That's probably the most useful thing, because all the other stuff is just a play on the stage. The first point of who am I? And it doesn't need to be that sort of strict as an inquiry, but it's completely counterintuitive for the human being, I think, to look at what they are to start with. And as far as the thought process getting away, I'll get back to that. Yeah, I'm kind of confused that everybody doesn't see this
or want to see it.
But most of humanity suffers through this contraction, through this separation caused. I'm separate me, and they're all separate, and I've got to compete with life, and that didn't work out well, and oh, hang on, it's all just an instinct, like this biological instinct coming into thought and saying, I need to preserve this and I need to protect it, and this is separate, I'm separate, this is all tangled together, but it's not real. And I can't understand how it's not just common knowledge, basically.
I think once you see thoughts for what they are, it's very hard to go back to understand that place that you used to be in, where thoughts seem to be real things that you were acting, and you were thinking of something that you were or somebody else was, and it all seemed so real. And then now you look at your thoughts and you go, well, that's an interesting one. Where'd that come from? And there's another one.
Yeah. They still,
that's everything
can fire exactly as it wants to.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Just, you don't look at it as, oh, that's really happening. This is what life is. I am this, or you are that. Just a thought.
I think there's a whole lot of
goes.
Yeah. I think there's a whole lot of subconscious. I think human beings run on subconscious conditioning. And that subconscious conditioning has always been programmed to think and exist from a reference point of being a separate I. And that just runs in the background. And the majority of what we're responding and reacting to and experiencing from that sense of separation is running in the background all the time. And I think, from my experience as John here, this human being, it's there is an experience of being a separate human being here. There's an experience of being a separate expression in this, with all its personality and characters. It just seems to be happening that way, but it's not actually a real separation. It's just life. It's the same life. This is all the same life. This is all exactly the same life as the trees, as the expression, as the energy, that the intelligence that's going on everywhere in nature, probably in the air particles you can't see. It's all just the same life anyway. This is just the same life. So this expression, this feeling of separation, happens, but it's not believed, and it's not important if it does that. It doesn't matter if it does that. I heard a quote from someone, and they were saying, the reason that they seem to be okay with life is because they just don't mind what happens. That's a nice play of words, because it's mind, it's thinking. They don't think about what's happening, so they don't mind whatever's happening. And that's sort of how it feels, I think, to explore this. But what I was getting to is that it seems to be, and the experience here was that there needed to be a cathartic change for this subconscious habit pattern of mind to break open. That's what happened here. I can remember the time it broke. It changed. I thought I'd broken my mind or something. I thought I'd broken something psychologically. And that was after a lot of low points, a lot of massive suffering, and then massive exploration, and then fairly intensive meditation. But it's not really that caused that change. It just the mind just had an opportunity to just untangle and decontract, and it didn't know it could do that until it happened, and then it went, oh, that's possible, because this is what, oh, of course, that's how it is. That's what this is. That's what I am. That's what the whole thing is. That's all that's going on. There's nothing mystical about realizing you are not. It's the opposite way around. Everyone goes, oh, I want to realize, I want to awaken, but I can't get it yet. It doesn't seem to work. I don't know why. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to work for me. And the loop of chasing and seeking. As I said before, I've said I don't think I was really ever a seeker. I wasn't really seeking when this change happened, this perspective change happened. I wasn't really seeking. I was just meditating so I could just get out of suffering, basically. Meditating and looking into things, but I wasn't seeking. I certainly wasn't seeking awakening or any of these things. I just thought that might have been what happens to some people, but I didn't think it was really a thing. And then when everything just changed, but it's also completely the same. It's just that whatever happens, it's okay, because it's not the separate me doing this. The me is an experience. So whatever legacy is going on in conditioning each human being here, it's just what accumulated in the lifetime, millions of billions of variables. Which is why when people say, how did you, like you hear a lot of people saying, well, this is the path and this is what you do and this is how to do it. And this is all thinking mind once again. But that's actually a bit misleading, because it just runs people off it more thinking. Okay, now I got it. It's actually not any of that. It's just realizing that you're already that. And what's going on is just the play. There's nothing actually wrong with anything. This is the texture right now. The mind's thinking, that's just the texture. That's great. It's actually quite beautiful. And yet it doesn't need to be known. That's the thing. The mind, I came from a state where I was like John, the thinking guy. I still think. I still go in and out of thought a lot. But the thought's like a tool. I was going somewhere else with that, but it seems to have disappeared. That happens a lot. So yeah, anyway, I can't remember what I was saying, but what I would just reiterate is that this is about, it's not, whatever we talk about won't be really right, won't be like the correct story. But what we're doing is seeing that all those things that because you don't know and you will not know, as that human being, you are an expression of the whole thing. And yet it's trying to summarize it down and quantify it by separating it. And it can't be separated because it's not separate. So that's the difference. That's the conundrum there. So the mind the human mind just does that. But what we're looking at is what kind of, I suppose, what the illusion is, what the idea of separation. Those things just aren't real. And the more you just look at those and say it's the netty thing, but it's not this and it's not that. It's a bit simplistic, but it's more like saying, okay, well, if I just look at that and I realize that that's not true. And I never really looked at the first point of I, and yet every time I look at that, everything dissolves because there's nothing there. You know, when you hear nothing, there's nothing separate. There isn't any separate thing really. It's all just appearances in this infinite intelligence. So, anyone got any questions? Because I'm just running on a tangent. And I've got about 15 things I'm trying to explain at once, and I can't. So, feedback would be good.
There's still the mind. I'm trying to get out of my mind to try and just experience to get out of trying to understand it in order to achieve something, because I know it's not achievable and it's ineffable and inexplicable. So I'm trying to get out of here, out of my questions, into the beingness of it.
Okay. And you that's trying to get out of it, is that there?
Is mind.
Is that real?
No.
So it's trying to get out of it and heal and do something, but the first point's not real. The first point's just thoughts.
It's all thoughts.
The identity is just thoughts. So it's the identity, which is thoughts, is trying to do something in thoughts to somehow make itself free of the thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah, when you explain it like that, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
It is ridiculous, but we don't look at it. It's funny. It's just funny. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. It's just it's just a fun exploration of how we just don't see this. Just an instinct. It's never been looked at properly. That's all. And I think, you know, everyone goes, okay, well, I'll look at it like that. Yeah, I can see that. I got it now. Yep, I've got it. But you haven't got anything because you are the thought. That's the whole thing. There's nothing to get. You're already right now.
Joke.
Right now, if you just stop for 1 second. And what's there? I mean, is there consciousness? Is there awareness?
Yes.
Of course, yeah. That's it. That's all. That's all that's needed. The rest happens anyway. And then the story gets added on, and that all keeps rolling. So by trying to work it out, you're just actually creating a finite problem.
Of course.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all. And so it's just noticing. It's just sort of noticing that background conditioning that's going on all the time.
John, the processes that, like the surrender and the Sedona method stuff that that one can do in order to get rid of some of the ongoing programs that seem to be running the show, and are causing a lot of the suffering. It seems that anything, if that happens, it's, I mean, for me, the seeking doesn't really induce suffering. And I haven't, this body, person, mind, whatever the biology, hasn't had to undergo great suffering in order to be on this journey, the process of self-realization. And I know that's all part of the story, but you said, I can't remember what you said, for your particular body mind, you had to go to a place that then started you looking at it. Is that what you said?
To explain it a bit more clearly and without the details, because the details are irrelevant, because it's like every individual's got billions of experiences building up in that organism. But I don't think for this, the way this was all set up, that wouldn't have broken. That wouldn't have changed.
It seems that it's so different for everyone. Every single person has a completely... There are people for whom they can be walking along, never given a thought to enlightenment, and boom, out of the blue, it just happens. And other people who've been on the journey for 50 years, for whom it never happens.
But at the end, if we just stepped back a little bit and said, who is it that's actually like becoming self-realized or not? Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no one there. It's just life. It's just life doing this way or that way or this way or that way, or understanding or not understanding. It doesn't matter. That's the whole thing. So whatever personal characteristics appear in that human being, if they don't matter because the bigger picture is looked at, then they're just textures that are happening that way. It's just part of that human being's play on the stage. So when that doesn't matter, nothing has to change. That character doesn't need to be improved at all. When that is truly accepted, and it's sort of not accepted by anyone, it's just, it is that. That's it. That's all. It is that. And all of these things are happening. Yep. What happens is there's just peace there, because whatever textures, it can even be physical pain. Physical pain can be there, but then, and that's not pleasant for the human organism, but it's still happening. It's appearing in what you are. It isn't who you are. So that's just another texture. It's just another. Pain is physically awful, but actually when it's really looked at, it's very interesting. It sounds crazy, but from personal experience, this is here from this organism, and this hasn't been life-threatening, unbearable pain, but there's been, pretty painful things. If it's really looked into, it's like, the body wishes that didn't happen, but actually, it's not actually who I am. Like if you just play a game and you said, imagine if there was no actual person here. Imagine if there was no I, no separate self here at all. And imagine if this was one connected, interconnected energetic expression appearing this way with senses, perspective through these nodes. Imagine if it's all the same thing. Just imagine if all of this is the same thing. This, that body, this, the trees in the pictures. Imagine if that's just the same thing. including all the stuff you can't see with these, vibrating energy, matter, molecules, particles, things coming and going in and out of matter. Imagine if that is all the same thing and it just expresses different ways. And imagine if then in the process of expressing as humanity, it creates through its biology and part of its growth and evolution, it creates this idea of self. And part of that is that it has to preserve that separate self that it's created, because that's part of the instinct of, imagine if that's happening. So does it really matter if the story doesn't get corrected? Does it really matter if the story is not going right? Because the story is not real anyway. So does it matter if it's I'm actually a big advocate here, as John expressing this way, of looking at the middle ground, which is the conditioned responses in life that create this, I suppose, unseen assumption of separation and the pain, the suffering that comes with that. Now, when we say suffering, you're saying, well, I don't really have much. I've had a lot of people who say, I don't really have a lot of suffering. I don't think I need that suffering. And, it doesn't matter. Usually there's some underlying yearning to harmonize that. So you might not be seeking as such, but
But if the seeking's happening, it's not a problem.
No,
Because
absolutely
it's
not.
happening. Because anything that's happening is what's happening.
That's right. It's just the flow.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're sitting here talking about this means that there was an impulse in that life to explore this.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, it's doing that. But it may not be for you because you're not separate, really. This is just interaction. Who knows? I'll never understand the complexity of what's going on here. But all of this that's going on, and that reaction and those words and these thoughts that are appearing and that, all that interaction is changing something somewhere, somehow. So, if we were putting this into a story, as your identification, your experience here might interact somewhere else, and that might have been why it was doing it. But it doesn't seem to be cause and effect. It just seems to be spontaneously blossoming and changing. But it is intelligent. There is intelligence, there's design, there's harmony, there's mathematical precision to some of the things they're expressing. So it's a mystery. But that isn't explainable or comprehensible. And I came from a controlling mind where I had to understand and control everything. That's just completely blown away, because it's just like, no, that's not going to happen. And that's okay. That's beautiful. That's actually part of the complexity. The appreciation of what's actually here is much more interesting than trying to know a part of it or control it or be able to explain anything. But the first point is seeing what's not true. And that's what we're doing here. We're exploring what's not actually true. What's really it's just a story, a thought process, a contraction, and very real feeling. Because if that sort of diminishes, all the rest of it's still happening. And you didn't do the contraction or the separation, and you don't do the freedom from that. But it changes.
Mm.
It can change just by exploring it. And it may not happen now. This is all just going on, something else, when something else fires up, some other subconscious process will fire up. And you'll go, oh yeah, I know. And then you'll go, oh no, I can't do that because I'm not separate. Oh, that's right. That's not, yeah, okay, I got it. Conceptually, I understand. Yeah, got that. Okay. All of that play, it's not you doing that either. It's the intelligence of life.
It's being played. Yeah.
It's being played. It's just massaging itself and exploring itself. And then eventually something clicks or opens in that, and then it changes. And that change has a different perspective, and it drops away the things that weren't real. And then that becomes new conditioning in the mind, in the background of the human being, the brain, or the mind, whatever we want to call it, the complexity, this infinite intelligence. And then that becomes a new default program in the background if we're putting it into a story. But you didn't do the first part, you didn't do the evolution, and you didn't do the new part. You're not doing any of it. But you get there's a great experience of being you involved in all of that. And it's much more interesting when it's actually seen as part of this play, as opposed to, I don't understand why this doesn't work right for me. Nothing has ever happened to you. That's the funniest thing about it. You's always been a thought. You has always been a contracted thought. And never, apart from the ideas and the thoughts, it doesn't exist. The body exists, the personality, all the billions of variables are expressing this way. But imagine if it's just one interconnected energy forming for a while as a human body with a brain and a mind that goes like this. And of course, the ego doesn't like this, because that's still in the background, by the way, in the background of the mind, there'll still be a predominant weight of conditioning that's the conscious mind's going, yeah, no worries, got it. Yeah, I like it. That's all good. And the background's going, I hate this. I can't stand it. No, I don't want to hear any more of that. But the conscious mind will go, no, it's okay. It's okay. This makes sense. But it's not supposed to make sense. Oh, so it doesn't make sense, but I should accept it. Okay. It's just so confusing. You can't make sense of it. So all we're doing is looking at things that just sort of don't make sense, and then they drop. But ultimately, this is all just, the word resonant, harmonic vibration, I don't know. They all sound so overused, but it's really just massaging itself back into non-reactivity over things that aren't real. That's what sort of goes, yep.
Sorry, for me, that was one of the most helpful things is to embrace the paradox of everything. I really, really like that, because, in being one and being two at the same time is perfectly possible. And that doesn't make any sense. And there's so many things that happen at the same time that don't make any sense, but that's fine. I'm so happy with that not making sense. And once I got over that hurdle of trying to make sense of everything, it's a lot more relaxed.
Yeah, because you are a thought in the first place, don't need to make sense of it. And you can't. Firstly, you don't exist. And secondly, it's too complex. So it's just this expression, those bodies, this body, that, the trees, the air, it's the same thing, just appearing differently for what we call a time in thought. It's just blossoming and changing. The word decaying doesn't sound right, because no, that's part of, I don't want to die. It's not really decaying. It's not even decaying.
Necessary.
Yeah, like it's just the way.
Just recycling.
Yeah, and that we're making stories. We sort of, anytime we try and explain it or talk about it, we'll make a story. But it's so really, ultimately, we're just getting back to all of this is just looking at what's not real. And that little bit, that little corner there that we're talking about the self and that identification, that's just not real. All the rest of it is based and built on that and referenced and storied from that identity, which didn't exist in the first place. And when that sort of sinks in, there's no knowing, there's no controlling or understanding or getting it or path, or, you can improve. A lot of people spend a lot of time improving the story of themselves, the idea of themselves. And that's frustrating in the first place, because it'll always be yearning for something else, because it can't ever really grasp what it is, because it's always changing anyway, but it's not supposed to change. It's supposed to be a separate entity. How does it keep changing? Like you've heard the ones, your cells, these cells are always changing. This isn't permanent. Even I heard something was mortician or someone talking about this, and they were saying it was a cloning guy, and he was saying, yeah, actually we found that, you know, the human brain dies and the heart dies, so the body dies, but the cells, they're all still alive. So which part of that is life? Which part of that is you? It's all you. It was all you. It was just you expressing as cells that coalesced and cooperated with a pumping heart and brain that cooperated in a way that expressed as a human organism. But it was all you. It's all the same thing. Every cell, every animating energy in the cells is you. And the trees and this and the air, and it's all you. You is just, you know, the you, as I've said before, the human mind just thinks you, me, separate person, idea, body, that's it. I know, I got it. Yep. How does that work? How does that make sense? It doesn't, because it's not a body. The body's just part of this. The body's just the expression. It's just like, you know, it's like a tree growing, and it learns tools to keep itself alive and propagate and prop itself up. And it adds on all these tools to make sure that organism stays alive. And at some point, those tools are no longer needed, so they can just be shed because it's already starting to see what it is as the whole. And that's what I think human intelligence, human intellect is doing. It's used all these tools, which were useful for a time to keep the biology alive, but they're starting to shed without it actually self-destroying, you know, because it's seeing itself as the whole. But it's, you know, it's quite an amazing thing that the human intellect can actually start to see itself as not just the body. It's an amazing thing, the human intellect. But it's part of this. It's not a separate thing. Because most of it,
it's incredible.
It's completely confusing. But that's a good confusion. That's an unknowingness. If you can be okay with unknowingness, it's a good step in the right direction to just basically be this flow that is actually what you are. Being a human being is an amazing experience.
Such a privilege.
Pardon?
Such a privilege.
Yeah, but for who? I'm going to keep playing with that.
Yeah. For no one.
But yet there is an experience here that has the privilege. So it's just freedom from that mind separation that happens. I would say most people don't ever look at it. More and more people are waking up to this and starting to think, oh, and as you said, some people, you know, they could sit on a rock or, you know, dig a field and they could just be in complete, you know, integration the whole time as what they are. But somehow, so there's that sort of, that's almost below conscious awareness or below, I don't know, this seems to blossom into being aware of itself, and the human intellect can be aware that it's this. If the human intellect never looks at it, like an animal or a dog doesn't look at it. An animal or a dog, you know, it does. If you do the spot test, where you understand the spot test, are they aware that they are a self? Are they aware that they are separate body? That's their body, or that's them. So that's like the base layer of awareness, I suppose, self-awareness, the biology becoming aware that it is this biology. That's me in the mirror. That's this biology, separate biology. I got it. I can see that. It's a very base layer. And then human intelligence has blossomed to such a point where it goes, actually, yeah, that's who I am. But actually, that's an idea. That's part of the intelligence reflecting on itself, looping back in on itself. Who I am is actually the whole expressing this way and having an experience through perceptions, through senses.
John, how long does the meeting normally last for?
Oh, about an hour or so. Do you need to go?
Yeah, I just
that's all right.
I promised my husband I'd cook dinner at 7.
Oh,
so.
I should limit it to an hour. So that's
No, you shouldn't. No, I should have said 7:30 rather than 7.
No, that's okay. If you want to leave, that's all right.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you you expressing again. It's wonderful for me.
Well, I always turn up and I don't know what's going to happen
Who
because
does?
there's no agenda. So I don't know. We might have a chat with whoever stays. Bernie, do you want to have a chat, a bit more of a chat, or you
Sure.
go ahead?
Yeah, I'll hang around.
Okay. Well, I'll let you know if I do another one in a couple of weeks.
Oh, please do, John, and I will definitely extend the time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Go well. Lovely to see you.
Bye.
Bye,
Nice
Hill.
to meet
See
you,
ya.
Bernie.
See
See
you,
you, Jen. Bye.
Are you staying around for a while, Jen?
What's the time? I've got about another 10 minutes.
Okay. How are you feeling with all of this?
Me? My greatest joy is getting together with other people and talking about these things. I just love hearing other people expressing their perspective of this. And I don't know, sometimes I learn stuff, or most of the time it's just a confirmation of stuff that I really feel already exists. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to explain, but I just enjoy it. I don't feel like I'm really have many questions anymore. I don't because, as you said, everything's fine as it is. So I find it very hard to come up with questions of why that would be. Do you know what I mean? If everything's fine as it is, then there's not much to ask about.
Yeah. And then there's just the story of, like, a lot of people still seem to be, in turmoil. You don't appear to be in turmoil. So that's nice. But a lot of people are really suffering and in turmoil, and they go into looking for non-duality to give them the answers to.
Yeah.
It'll be the get out of jail free card. If I can just work this out, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
If you give them the little pointer that, well, no, you won't.
Well, it's really, you are actually okay. It's just that your story's going through a lot of shit at the moment.
Yeah, the story's just playing that way for a while, and
Yeah.
and
And I
actually,
think if you go through sections of like that in your life, and I have had moments where I've been very distressed, and you think at that moment, oh my goodness, this is it. This is all that could ever be. This is so terrible. And then you realize when you look at your life, you've had moments like that, and they come and they go. Hello. It doesn't ever seem to stay that way. It comes and it goes. It might be, slightly better, slightly worse, or absolutely fabulous. But that's all just on the day what it is, or in the moment. But it's always changing. So once you can kind of get a perspective, I think, of it as a play, you can spend more time being relaxed and fine with that. Whatever happens, happens. And then at other times, it catches me unawares. I'm right in there going, oh, I'm having a terrible day, and I'm in it, so in it. But, that's life. I don't beat myself up about that anymore. I just go, once I see it, I'm laughing and going, oh, you silly duffer. You got caught in it again. Doesn't matter.
and if I think if people stop looking for that, the common thing is I haven't quite got it. I haven't quite got it. I understand it, but I haven't quite got it. That's what
But
a really common.
I suspect a lot of people who think they haven't quite got it, it's more that they think it's a permanent state. Some minute they haven't got it, and the next minute they have got it, and everything changes, and it's just rainbows, and I don't know what they think. But for me, it's moment by moment, and there's always this underlying everything's okay because everything's one. But I spend some time in the play thinking I am the actor, and other times I'm just sitting back watching it, and none of it really matters. So I think that we get really caught up about this great moment of realization. And in the same way, it can be like that. So it can be that, and it cannot be that. Do you know what I mean? It's that paradox, which makes it quite funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're just expressing similar things in different ways, I think. One thing that I find I sort of wanted to respond to it, which is almost instinctive then,
Yeah,
when you said it's not a permanent thing. And
but it is.
in this from this perspective here, this experience, whatever this is, there was a permanent shift that always plays in the background now.
Yeah,
And so that's not negating what you said. It's just a different way of saying it, because that it's not a knowing. It's like it just is, and then it's sort of it's now integrated as that is what it is, and all of those things you were talking about can still happen.
yeah.
All of that interaction and the overwhelm and all, but they never. They're this. I don't know. This.
Yeah. It's never the same as
is
it
never,
is before that happens.
No, it's never
Yeah.
been the same as it's never been like lost in it. It's always like there's a spaciousness, and even all of those things that happen, but they don't ever become the entity anymore. Once that changed, that never became
Yeah.
again. And it sounds like you've had a lot of these experiences anyway, and they're just experiences, and we just got to use words to talk about these things. I just think what happens is once that change of perspective abides, because it's already like that, it's just seen itself as that.
Yeah.
Then all the rest of the stuff is still happening, including all of the inconveniences of life and the characters firing up from the conditioning that's all subconscious, and it just does that, and it's okay. And when that is all okay, because this has seen itself as the whole, all of those things happen and they still fire up, but that conditioning is no longer fed with identification. So what does seem to happen is those conditionings that fire up express, and they may be awful, they may be really unpleasant. But when it's not reacted to as identification, they express, and in the human organism, they seem to dissolve or be rewritten with much less intensity.
Yeah.
Because I just know that I can still react as John to certain things, and it's usually so transitory, but it can still happen. But it's almost like that's just cleaning house. It's like, it's good. It's not good or bad really, but it's like this is back into that middle ground of conditioning. And when that middle ground of conditioning is played with in the whole, acknowledging itself, that conditioning just has no real juice. So as it plays with itself, it just keeps changing to be less and just becoming more flow. That seems to be what happens. That's what's happened here anyway.